Justice is a complicated thing. It's safe to say that pretty much anyone listening to this hopes they'll never be a part of the justice system, as you never know when the wind will blow harshly against you, making you set sail for imprisonment, or worse yet, death.
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator, Enrique Couto, and here we are, episode 201. I hope you all enjoyed very much our big episode 200 celebration. I got a lot of awesome emails and social media contact about it. You seem to really dig what we did, and I'm glad because I dig doing it. If you didn't get a chance to listen, well, it's last week's show and I highly recommend it. But speaking of pride and being proud, today's story is special to me because it was sent in by an Ohio writer. And I, being a proud Ohioan, love sharing the art. So, we have a very special story from Aaron Cook's book, Scream If You're Having Fun, which is available now on Amazon for you all to listen to. But before we get to that, I want to say a humongous thank you for all of you listening, because you see, it's the middle of summer, and lots of people, in my opinion boring people, but maybe they're just normal people, don't want the spooky in the dead of summer, but I certainly do, and so do you all who are listening right now. So thank you for listening, and make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app. And while you're there, leave us a star rating. It makes a big difference for the show and helps people like us discover the program. And speaking of people like us, make sure to join us at our Facebook group, which is Weekly Spooky's Tomb of Terror. Just type it into Facebook and join us as we share all kinds of scary good fun. And if you have a friend you think would love the spooky on the weekly, send them our way. But now, my dear listeners, I think it's getting a little cold outside, even for the dead of summer. So let's emphasize dead of summer together after these quick words. Hell Hath No Fury by Aaron Cook. Oh shoot, the cookies! Zelda Mae Darling had been in the kitchen all day, and the stress of hosting a dinner party had caused her to nearly forget about the chocolate chip treats that were roasting in the oven. She fitted her dainty hands into mitts and plucked her signature dessert from the sauna. No blemishes of overcooking to be found. Pulling the elongated trays out, she didn't wait 2 minutes before conducting a taste test. Delicious, if she did say so herself. She treated herself to a second one. Jake wouldn't approve of the extra snack, but what he didn't know wouldn't hurt him. There was more than enough food, she justified with internal guilt. The housewife had been in domestic bliss for 3 full years and was still in her early 20s. Born in small-town Arkansas in 1950, the Belle had left home to attend Texas A&M. Towards the end of her first year there, she worked an alumni ball where she met Big Jake Darling, an oil bigwig and generous donor to his old stomping grounds. Despite the 3-decade age gap, Jake fell madly in love with the fair-skinned, dark-haired server in the go-go boots, and his resources made it pretty easy for Zelda Mae to ignore the pot belly, receding hairline, and uneven mustache. After mere weeks of whirlwind courting, the pair joined in matrimony in front of a crowd of hundreds at his 90-acre ranch in the otherwise modest village of Tumbleweed. Jake was eager to prove to his nubile bride that he had learned from the mistakes of his first 2 marriages. There had been some downs. Jake was ornery, hypercritical, and mentioned his appreciation for the anatomy of other women, most even younger than her, quite often. But he was a man, and oh, what a man he could be. That little wallflower who entered College Station would be surprised at what she became. Prior to her nuptials, Zelda May's culinary expertise topped out at popping microwave popcorn, but now she was a regular Julia Child. She chuckled at what her younger self would say if she found out about the elaborate shindigs she now held on a regular basis. Tonight, she would be hosting a soiree for Jake's colleagues and their wives. It was an important one. Cattle mogul K.L. Bandy had accepted an invitation. Joining his inner circle was a guaranteed ticket to political success, which the oil man craved. He had been locally beloved on the village council for a number of years, but he was sick of judging pie bake-offs and attending ribbon-cutting ceremonies for libraries. The state senate was calling him. All Bandy had to do was hand him the phone. 10 minutes had passed since Jake's promised 5:30 homecoming. This worried Zelda May sick. It was a pretty common occurrence for him to overshoot his ETA, but precedent never made it peaceful. He was a wealthy and powerful man, which automatically put a target on his back. The poor wife never knew if her gregarious partner had blown away the time chatting with an old chum, or had been assassinated by an envious political opponent. The hypothetical loss of her paramour made her sick to her stomach, but she couldn't regress the paranoia. Finally, Jake stumbled in, having gotten a head start on the spirit imbibement of the night. "Hi, honey," Zelda May lit up. "Hey, Biscuit." Jake hiccuped his pet name for her as his massive jowls jiggled and his pale white belly cut into his everything's bigger in Texas belt buckle. He stunk of the cheapest gin Brady's bar had to offer, and the collar of his white Colonel Sanders suit was scuffed. In Zelda May's eyes, she was looking at Paul Newman. "The guests should be here soon." "Getting there. You need any help?" "Well, actually, if you could..." Jake's sobering snooze began the second it was even implied there was a way he could streamline the toil of his labored spouse. It was no big deal. She was pretty sure she liked doing housework. There were still several dishes she needed to magically conjure before 9 o'clock, then she needed to wash up. The feast worked up a sweat, and it would be unladylike to not present herself as immaculate as possible. Not that long ago, the looming threat of the deadline would have scared her something fierce, but not anymore. Sure enough, the spread was laid out, and she emerged from the powder room renewed in her pearls and heels mere minutes before the first ring of the doorbell, the sound of which revived her downed beau, who quickly wiped the drool from his face. "Harvey! Lois!" The learners were the beneficiaries of the death of the Mister's father, which granted them control over one of the state's largest construction firms. Harvey had never actually seen a pile of rubble, and Lois, also from old money, was prone to making statements that made her formerly modest friend feel insecure about her background. Up next were the Duprees. Don had recently acquired controlling interest in the popular, inexpensive, and small chain Selman's department store, which he was eagerly licking his lips to merge with a larger company. Flonetta and Ducky Perry arrived shortly after. Years of entertaining them hadn't shed a light on what they did for a living. All Zelda May knew was they were filthy rich. Just when Zelda May was about to shepherd her company into the dining room for their banquet, a limousine pulled up to the Darling residence. The driver exited his position to release an invitee that Zelda May had forgotten about. But Jake certainly hadn't. K.L. Bandy. Everybody stopped what they were doing to gaze upon the richest man in the Lone Star State, which angered Lois Lerner, who had only belted out a stanza and a half as she cooed and curled over the piano. The VIP looked nothing like the image Zelda May had cooked up in her head. She had pictured a good old boy with roughly the same features as her beloved and his colleagues. Instead, a decrepit skeleton shambled up to her porch, escorted on each shoulder by a Miss Texas contender. The man, half as old as the earth, and his gal pals glacially meandered towards his admirers inside. An irate Jake furiously barked at Zelda May to stop daydreaming and open the door for the guest of honor long before he reached the welcome mat. "Howdy, Mr. Brandy," an excited Don Dupree powered through the crowd to win the race to determine the old man's inaugural conversation. Dupree firmly grasped Bandy's hand in a shake, which cracked the Methuselah of Meat's worn joints. Embarrassed, Double D frantically apologized to the unoffended Baron. Despite his assurance, Don replayed the moment in his head, over and over, removing himself from the camaraderie to self-flagellate. "Hello, Mr. Bandy," beamed Zelda May. "Jake has told me so much about—" "Can we get you anything, Mr. Bandy?" The king of the castle stifled his wife. He shot her a dirty look as the Ancient One declined. Jake pulled Zelda May aside and mentioned his distaste for the comment when Bandy was out of earshot. What things was she implying he had mentioned? Did he look suspicious just now? She was going to blow his big shot. "Sorry, honey. Just don't talk to him or look at him." The convoy entered the pure white dining room. Effusive scores were given to Zelda May's creations before a bite was even taken, including many from the treasured newcomer, who sat in the head chair after the usual alpha ceded his territory, for this one night only. Convivial talk among the boys followed as the women chatted about past and future dinner parties, although a rattled Don mostly just nodded in agreement, too worried about throwing another boneheaded interception. This was their one chance to impress a man that could fatten their portfolios. Ducky Perry fantasized about his soon-to-be new best friend handing over the deed to one of his tremendous golf courses. Jake took every inch to bring up his steakhouse concept. Tired of all beef all the time, the gazillionaire never offered much response to the proposal. Did this guy even know anything about running a restaurant? Further incessant half-baked hypotheticals continued to line dance on the geezer's already feeble nerves. The brisket was excellent, the corn was phenomenal, and the apple pie had been some of the best he had tasted in his countless years on this planet. But another round of rump kissers had left Bandy exasperated. "Zelda May, quit staring at Mr. Bandy," Jake reprimanded his adult wife as if she was a toddler with a tattling habit. "I wasn't," she defended herself. Another round of Tupperware talk had been her limit. For the past 10 minutes, she had been zoned out, affixed on nothing in particular. "Yes, you was. Now apologize." "It's quite all right," Bandy foolishly said in an agitation that seemed to imply he was more irritated by him than her. "Sometimes she gets like this." "Like what?" Zelda May countered, now more anxious to hear her fictional shortcomings than appearing demure. "Don't start. You started it." "Folks, I think I'm gonna call it a night," the esteemed mogul said as he gestured for his twins to help him up and out. Part of him felt bad for his dog-piled host, but most of him wanted to thank her for giving him an excuse to escape this never-ending assault of false praise. "See what you did?" Jake blared to a degree that the hard-of-hearing Bandy heard from a room away. "Zelda May, honey." Flonetta's fake accent permeated with a passive aggressiveness that elicited a cold draft down the pariah's spine. "I hope you're happy." "I almost had a third car dealership," Don whined. The grumbling gaggle emotionally and wordlessly returned to their vehicles, leaving Zelda May alone to face Jake's wrath. In addition to tonight's alleged staring gaffe, he found nitpicks in the food he scarfed down and found flaws with her hair, makeup, and chubby cheeks. If she kept letting herself go, that girl he saw today after work might just have to move in. Jake continued his relentless attack, which would have driven Zelda May to tears if she hadn't cried them all out over the years. As a compulsion, she started to work on the Everest of dishes. Of course, the supposed clean freak didn't offer her a modicum of help. At least he was talking to her. That was a refreshing change of pace. She began scrubbing the tainted plates in a fury as Jake continued his verbal bull rush. A suddy mess, Zelda May pulled the dishwasher rack out and marched to the fridge for some Chardonnay, which she elected to down straight from the bottle. Jake scoffed at the lush she could be and attempted to pry the bottle loose. Much bigger, his strip sack was overpowering, spiking and staining the kitchen floor with wet glass. Naturally, this was seen as purely Zelda May's error, which resulted in a final flurry of condescension. Sick of hearing these judgments, the harried housewife gave her husband a shove, her anger propelling her strength to unprecedented levels. The back of Jake's boots skidded over the edge of spillage. The hoss tried to compose his balance, which only caused him to dance more erratically before he fell over backwards, in a heap, cracking his neck on the still exposed dishwasher. The crunch was louder than the snap of the wishbone of her famous Thanksgiving turkey. No choking, no throes, no mournful departing apology. Instant death. Don't go away. Weekly Spooky will be right back. Stunned, the accidental killer stared back at her unintentional victim. The eyes that had been full of fire just seconds before were now ghostly white. She didn't blame herself. It was a self-induced accident, a fatal folly caused by his own foolishness. Now single, part of her felt sad about the loss of her partner. But more of her felt relieved that there was finally some quiet in here. Now she could tidy this mess in peace. Calm as could be, Zelda May grabbed the mop and dustpan and commenced the arduous cleanup, a chore that was made more difficult by the 250-pound hindrance that blocked some of the puddle. Manslaughter was no excuse for a dirty home. "My husband is dead," she phoned the cops. As hard as she tried to appear hysterical, she was no actress. The death of Big Jake Darling sent shockwaves through the local community. Although Zelda May figured she would be spending the foreseeable future playing the part of the sympathetic widow, her adopted home quickly made her a female Peter Sellers and cast her in many roles. A bloodthirsty harpy, a cold-blooded Jezebel, and an unscrupulous gold digger who pulled out the ultimate gambit to collect Jake's money, which, unbeknownst to them, was sealed off by the prenup he convinced her to sign. Many claimed they saw this coming years ago. There was always something off about that darling woman. Even with forensic experts confirming the death by misadventure theory, the late's buddy, one Sheriff Zeke Hitchens, decided to treat this as what they all knew it was: a heartless murder. That year's trial of the century followed. Soon everyone with access to a newspaper had an opinion on Zelda May Darling. Jake's financial accomplishments, subjective platitudes, and status as a local leader were broadcasted non-stop with no mention of his tantrums or philandering proclivities. On the other side of the token, any assumed character defect of Zelda May was taken with a tower of salt. Don Dupree mentioned the foaming madness he witnessed firsthand at the dinner party and wondered aloud how he narrowly escaped the massacre. The defendant was powerless and unable to bring up the drunken, not-so-nice words Harvey Lerner had to say about Jake that a similarly inebriated Lois had blurted to her during an Avon social. Zelda May was without any support. Even her own mother had severed ties, fearful of what having a cozy relationship with her criminally insane daughter would have on her own reputation. "I didn't raise her that way, you know," Mama Darling made sure to alert everyone in the courthouse. The judgment was swift. Zelda May Darling was going to fry. The poor girl had made the mistake of bagging a lofty and influential trophy. $20 million of leverage had been the difference between life without parole and the electric chair. The consensus was euphoric. Some felt even the most damning conviction was still too lenient for that bitch. Too bad they couldn't personally summon Satan to drag her to the netherworld where she belonged. State-endorsed killing is a lengthy process. Although scheduled for a 1972 execution, Zelda May's lawyers appealed and petitioned as much as they could, much to the chagrin of the mob. Years passed. No longer was she a bubbly socialite or an angelic homecoming queen. She had grown hardened by the prison system. Unkempt hair, a haggard face, a perpetual scowl were all that remained. A new charity believed they had found a loophole to prevent her death from being a crispy one, which earned them hatred and mockery. It was too late anyway. She wanted to die. Finally, on the hottest day of 1983, Zelda May was ushered to the chamber. Her last meal the previous night was 2 cookies, one more than Jake permitted her to have. The condemned was placed in the Sparky Ferry and asked if she had any final words. She had none. A guard walked to the lever. He had been a mere child during Zelda May's trial. His mother and father made her out to be a boogie woman, but there was a sadness in her wild eyes. A story only she knew. Still, this is what the people of Texas craved. If there was a way to move her demise to a packed house at the Astrodome, few would protest it. The guard swung the switch. Zelda May's pupils bulged and her limbs thrashed. The watts coursing through her veins were nothing compared to the hatred flowing inside her vengeful brain. She outlasted the average survival time by 10 agonizing seconds out of pure spite. Even when public enemy number 1 had been reduced to a charred hunk of flesh, the overseers were fearful she had even more fight to give. "She's hell's problem now, boys." The warden congratulated the elimination of the menace. "Let's hope they keep her." "Hope you bitches are having a good sleigh." Delaney Parker and her flamboyant co-host Chet screamed their popular trademarked greeting before they launched into the exposition of their latest vlog. A consummate influencer, Delaney insisted on 14 more takes before she was satisfied. Chet and Delaney were the team behind Booze and Bludgeonings, a lifestyle brand they had started together 4 years prior while attending UCLA. What started off as an online channel devoted to their mutual interest in both true crime and alcohol blossomed into a multi-level brand that included a podcast, t-shirts, and of course, their very own IPA. The duo was most famous for their broadcasts from murder sites. Their most popular episode up to this point had been the night they braved the Lizzie Borden Inn. Although it was a bit intimidating to be on the grounds of one of the most infamous slayings ever, neither talking head believed in the supernatural, contrary to what their subscribers believed. Chet had added those orbs and moans in post right after they filmed their 40 minutes worth and bolted. Their fans lapped that slop up. B&B was a polarizing empire. Many felt their content was crass and exploitive, not to mention derivative. However, those critics were drowned out by their adoring acolytes, who loved to live vicariously through the pair's Instagram page just as much as they enjoyed the journey into the macabre. Their latest stunt was sure to be their biggest hit yet. A live midnight broadcast from the grave of Zelda May Darling, a Southern belle who rang for the last time in 1982. In the 40 years since Zelda May's death, Tumbleweed had grown up to a fair-sized city of 60,000. several miles from the pauper's grave they had given their most notorious former resident. Despite the shame of her now dead or senile damners, the terror of Tumbleweed had been given a forgiving retrospective thanks to countless televised reenactments, which elaborated on the kangaroo court injustice she had been forced to endure, as well as revelatory evidence Jake Darling may not have been a nice man. A museum in her honor now stood not far from the very same courthouse she had been mortally punished. Cheap paperbacks inspired by her saga littered bookstores. A street fair sold nachos and cotton candy on the weekend closest to the anniversary of the night she lost her innocence. Tourists, mostly women who occasionally had half the mind to butcher their own doofus husbands, flooded the streets of the town that had ostracized her. Zelda May was forced to watch it all. Somewhere. Every cheap trinket, every hollow word of support, every dollar made on her trauma. A montage of retribution against her. A cosmic decree for an unpremeditated act. No longer human, she still felt the pain of her penance burn across her changed image. She pleaded for her unseen tormentor to stop, which only intensified the noise. 4 decades of torture had felt like 4 eons. Where was this adulation back in her own day? These parasites worshipping her were no better than the cocksuckers who put her away. The cycle flipped back to rage as she gnashed and snarled, vowing to break free. Halfway across town, 2 of those profiteers had taken up shelter at the Lone Star Motel. Surveying her outfit for the big show, Delaney was assured by her boyfriend that she looked banging as he cradled her body, which earned a push. No macho bullshit. Chet needed to focus and stay in the caricature they had created. It was funnier, and the demographics suggested their male viewership might take a hit if they found out she was off the market. This was a big night, and he wasn't going to ruin it. Neither were the haters online. Tonight she was going to break the internet. Fuck! I keep losing service! It was now 11:58, and the event seemed on thin ice due to spotty reception. Chet was getting fed up with Delaney's divaness. The Hicks had buried Zelda May so far out in the boonies that Delaney feared they wouldn't make it on time. Finally, right over top the only recently installed marker, 2 bars lit up. It was gonna happen. Zelda May's reputation had allowed them to become innovators. Cemeteries usually frowned on trifling among the graves. Delaney learned that the hard way. She took a deep breath and visualized the viral hit she had on her hands. The countdown hit 0. The red light went on. The marshy ground began to open up. "What the fuck?" Chet said in his natural gruff accent, which broke their no unbleeped swearing rule. "Chet, girl, we're live," Delaney sternly reminded as she panned the camera just as her lover was forcefully snatched by a bony hand. First by the leg, and then quickly by the throat. "Fuck all of you," the Revenant hissed as she smashed another man's neck. On purpose this time. "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god!" Delaney took off, half in fear, half in amazement. All she had to do was outrun this old bag of bones, and she'd have the most watched video of all time. 40 years of rust and rot had not slowed Zelda May down. The former track star let her prey have a head start just to give her some false hope, and then sicked her. The bones of her malformed legs twisting and bending with each stride until she pounced on this intruder, pinning her against the side of the vehicle they had violated her resting place with. She was a pretty girl, roughly the same age she had been the night she really died. Zelda May looked at the ghastly visage in the rearview window, gasped, and with one violent tug, ripped Delaney's face clean off. She needed it more than her. The triple homicider realized she had crudely applied the mask. and adjusted it over the exposed rottage, shooing away a few worms as well. She was young and beautiful again, with a whole town to paint red. Zelda May reset her lower body and made her way towards Tumbleweed. The audience couldn't believe the sheer tackiness of this spectacle. Boos and bludgeonings faking their own deaths, a phony monster, never-ending footage of dirt. The channel had truly jumped the shark. Even their most loyal followers logged off the live stream in droves. By the time the battery had ran out, the incident was so panned, Chet and Delaney never made another video or public appearance. Ever again. I love a good revenge tale, and if you want to hear more from the author Aaron Cook, a fellow Ohioan, check out his book, Scream If You're Having Fun, by Aaron Michael Cook. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and you can get a digital version for as low as 99 cents, and I want to give him a plug because he was kind enough to offer up his story for all of us to enjoy. And boy, I have to say, listening to this story, it made me think a lot of the little Kentucky ladies I grew up with, my mother's mother and my mother's aunt. They were just full of, pardon the expression, piss and vinegar. And I kind of fed that into my characterization, so I hope you all enjoyed that a whole hell of a lot, as much as I did. And a big thank you again to Aaron Michael Cook for letting us read his story. And now I want to say another huge thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters. These are folks who not only join our Patreon at weeklyspooky.com, where they get all kinds of fun bonus material, but they pay a little bit more just to hear their names on the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Bobbletopia.com, Megan Hua, Julia Kirsch, Brent McCullough, Steve King, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much, and if you want to support the show directly, just go to weeklyspooky.com, click on Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month, you get all kinds of bonus material, like an exclusive story every month, behind-the-scene looks at all of the intriguing things I'm up to, and so much more. But now I need to get out of here because I have so much more cooking for you all here at Weekly Spooky. So, until next time, my friends, for myself, for my executive producer Rob Fields, my producer Dan Wilder, and our composer Ray Mattis, I will talk at you next time. And thank you again for over 200 episodes of The Spooky on the Weekly. I love you all so much.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.